All right, Lloyd. Tell me about your battle with Mike Stamler and the SBA press office over the last decade.
All right. Well, let's see. In 2002, I got the GAO to investigate the diversion of federal small business contracts to corporate giants. They found over 5,000 large businesses getting federal small business procurement awards. The SBA press office immediately went to work trying to cover it up. And I testified before Congress, and the Associated Press did a story, and it ran in about, 40 newspapers around the country. And right off the bat, the SBA tried trying to say that it was the result of computer glitches and honest mistakes and things like that. Most recently, when NBC found IBM, Oracle, and Hewlett-Packard getting small business contracts, they claimed it was anomalies. And so as I have sued the government and won, I think, over 30 legal battles that expose information that shows that these large corporations are getting small business contracts, I've also, the SBA press office has fought it. And they put forth a lot of energy trying to convince people that I'm a lunatic, a conspiracy nut, and the American Small Business League is a sham. Well, let's just say those three things, it's kind of irrelevant. Forget about me. Doesn't really matter what I am. It's irrelevant. Let's just talk about the facts. The facts are, that the SBA Inspector General, here's a report right here, has been finding corporations misrepresenting themselves as small businesses. This came out in 1995. That's a fact. Here's a copy of a blow-up of a page from the SBA Small Business Database back in 2002. Office Depot, 44,000 employees, $12 billion in sales. That was in the SBA's database of small businesses. These guys are getting small business contracts, right? So
what does Mike Stamler say about that stuff?
Well, they actually, it's funny you should say that. In fact, let me find something to show you here. Let me put my little dog down here if I can find it. Right about the time this report came out from the SBA Inspector General, it says one of the biggest challenges facing the Small Business Administration and the entire federal government today is that large businesses are receiving small business procurement awards and agencies are receiving credit for these awards. That's report 515 from the SBA Inspector General. So every year since 2005, this has been named the #1 challenge at the SBA. What Stamler did was put out a press release around 2006 that said it's a myth. It's a myth. Like, what did I say before? Unicorns and dragons? Yeah, it's a myth. Like, Robin Hood. It's not a myth. I think there's been about 20 investigations so far. So everything that Stamler says is a lie, quite frankly. And what bothers me is I can't get anybody from the media, to go out and ask him some tough questions. Here's an interesting thing here. This came from the General Accounting Office. By failing to hold firms accountable, SBA and contracting agencies have sent a message to the contracting community that there is no punishment or consequence for committing fraud. Report 10108 GAO. Right? They don't say that it's a myth. They don't say it's anomalies, right? Here's another funny thing. We sued the SBA for the names of firms that got small business contracts. And they told a federal judge that they had no idea who got federal contracts, which is a bold-faced lie. Judge says the court finds curious the SBA's argument that it does not control the very information it needs to carry out its duties and missions and functions. U.S. District Court Judge Marilyn Patel, August 2008. Now, why would the SBA lie to a federal judge? That's a pretty heavy deal, isn't it? So what are they trying to cover if they're lying to a federal judge? Here's what they're trying to cover up. Mike Stamler and the SBA press office has lied to the American people, Congress, and the public for a decade about this. The truth is that in Report 516 from the SBA Inspector General, they say that these large corporations get small business contracts through false certifications and improper certifications, which is fraud. The SBA Office of Advocacy has said it's vendor deception, another example of fraud. You see in this one report here, it basically says that the SBA is basically, would you say that that's encouraging people to commit fraud?
Yeah.
So that's the truth. So again, they spent a lot of time and money to try to make me look like a conspiracy. I'm just reading the reports here, folks. I'm not making this stuff up. I can read. I'm just reading this stuff, right?
It seems like this is pretty clear evidence that this is fraud. So how do they get away with it?
How do they get away with it? They've hired some of the biggest public relations firms in the world. We know that they've hired an international PR firm that specializes in crisis management. Now, why in the world would the Small Business Administration of Washington, D.C. hire an international public relations firm that specializes in crisis management? I've got a copy of a contract where they pay them as much as $25,000 for a single day. And this company's located in Eastern Europe. Sounds kind of suspicious to me. Here's a funny story. 3 or 4 years ago, I'm in D.C. to talk to the SBA Inspector General. And you get off the elevator on the 5th floor, you take a right, and the SBA Administrator's office is to the right. You go down the hall, the Inspector General's office is there, and down the other end is the Chief Counsel's office. And I met with the Inspector General and the Chief Counsel. I got back in the elevator, and I saw a sign that said SBA Press Office, and I thought, well, I'll go in and say hi to Mike Stamler. That'll make him happy. So I walked down the hall, and lo and behold, that office looked like where they keep the nuclear launch codes in Washington. I've never seen a more secure door in D.C. I've been all over Washington. I've spent years lobbying Congress. I've been all over the place. And I've never seen a door like that. And it was kind of shocking. I guess the other thing that's interesting about the press office is we did a Freedom of Information request for Mike Stamler's phone records. We wound up in the Supreme Court. Now, why do you have to go to the Supreme Court to get Mike Stamler's phone records? See, what we did was we FOIA'd about a half a dozen other similar-sized agencies, the press office director's phone records. They just emailed them to us. It was so simple, I think they didn't even charge us for it, did they? You know, it was so simple, boom, it's free. And yet to get Stamler's phone records, we had to go to the Supreme Court. Now ask yourself, what are in Mike Stamler's phone records that they've got this big, heavy door, looks like the launch codes at NORAD, and you've got to go to the Supreme Court to get his phone records? I'll tell you what I think. I think that Mike Stamler works with some of the biggest public relations firms in the world. I think he works with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I think he works with the Pentagon Press Office. And I think they do everything they can to lie to the American people, Congress, and the public. And people like me that are just reading these investigations, they try to make us look like we're conspiracy nuts and fools. I guess I've gone on national television, I don't know, 3 or 4 dozen times. And for every national television appearance I've gone on, 1 or 2 have been canceled just shortly before the show. Now, we've seen Mike Stamler's emails to journalists telling them that I'm a conspiracy nut and a lunatic and everything. I think he said that there's a lie in every paragraph I write. And I'm just reading this stuff, right? So I'd love to see the Inspector General for the SBA investigate the SBA Press Office. I'd love to see the FBI investigate the SBA Press Office because they're lying. Now, what's happening here, by the way, is felony federal contracting fraud under Section 16D of the Small Business Act. The penalty is 10 years in prison. I do admit that one reason large corporations get small business contracts is policies that the SBA and other agencies have passed. But here's one problem with that. Federal law defines a small business as being independently owned and having less than 1,500 employees. Any federal policy that allows a Fortune 500 firm or companies like Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace and Finn Mechanica to get contracts, to small business contracts, is illegal. It's also inconsistent with the congressional intent of passing the Small Business Act. I think President Eisenhower would roll over his grave if he knew that in 2012 we're giving small business contracts to Russian-owned arms dealers and giant Italian defense contractors. So Stamler is a lying con man, and he should be investigated for collusion to commit contracting fraud, and we don't need people like that working in America. That's what I think about those guys.